You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 177, 3 Steps to Making Business Boundaries Successful. If you're a business owner who wants to improve your time management and elevate your productivity so you can maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic that turns out to be a topic I apparently am incredibly passionate about. And I would actually argue very, very important. It's so important to have healthy, clear boundaries for the success of your business and your personal life. Boundaries are going to help you feel more in balance. Boundaries literally solve so many time management issues that come up for my clients in one-on-one coaching. It would blow your mind. So today, I'm actually sharing with you my 3-step framework that I teach my one-on-one clients, and I wanted to share with you here today. Now, before we dive in, I have some exciting news, and I say exciting because I happen to be incredibly excited about it. And that is, I am hosting a free vision board happy hour. That's right, on December 3rd, from 4 to 5:30 Pacific Standard, I am hosting a free vision board happy hour. You see, I now more than ever believe 3 things are so true. 1, having a strong vision going into 2021 is a must. I think back to what actually has gotten me through 2020, and it was that I never wavered, that I held so closely to my heart, my vision that I had for myself in 2020. 2, community, collaboration, and support are essential. I have tapped into my community to not just keep my mindset strong, but to really keep my spirits high, and also loving that I did have a virtual community that I could tap into when my friends locally I wasn't able to reach or talk to or hang out at barbecues and pool parties. Community and collaboration and support are essential. And 3, having more fun together, even if virtually, is absolutely needed. So because I know those things are so important and I believe that they are, I was like, how can I create this for my community, the listeners of Productivity Straight Talk, for my clients? And I decided we should get together and have a happy hour. So it's going to be some fun conversation, cocktails or mocktails, and vision board creation. This is completely free. So to join us, head on over to amberdelagarza.com/vision, and you will get all the details of how to join us on December 3rd. Again, go to amberdelagarza.com/vision. And now let's get to the straight talk. Hello and good morning. Okay, so maybe it's not good morning to you, depending on where you're listening, but for me, it's bright and early and good morning. I have recorded and re-recorded this episode coming up on countless times, and I had to put it to bed. I had to step away from it. I had to come back to it and circle back, which is a great productivity lesson, because guess what? I actually ended up missing the deadline. But I knew that I wanted to bring to you a great quality podcast episode, as I strive to do each and every week. And I wasn't willing to lower that standard because I felt that I wasn't showing up my best. And when I say not showing up my best, what I mean is I could not, for the sake of anything, succinctly talk to you about boundaries. And the reason I couldn't succinctly talk to you about boundaries is because I have so much to say about boundaries. Because for me, as a coach and a trainer that specializes in time management and productivity and how we can show up our best, I have a lot of experience with a lot of conversations and a lot of stories and examples around why boundaries are so important. And I got myself so excited to try and share all of those or many of those in one episode. And I don't really think that that is going to serve you best. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share with you my 3-step framework that I share with my coaching clients on a regular basis on how to truly, 1, clearly identify your own boundaries. Number 2, how to lovingly and clearly communicate your boundaries with others. Number 3, how to hold your boundaries. All right, so let's dive in. First, I did an episode way back in episode 37, all about boundaries as well. But in that episode, I went into the numerous benefits of establishing boundaries, the 5 most important types of business boundaries, how to relay your boundaries to new clients and employees specifically, and how to enforce your boundaries effectively. Now, that was a very robust episode where I broke down the 5 areas in your business or life that you can create boundaries, which are physical boundaries, time boundaries, what you do or don't do boundaries, how you spend your money, and then lastly, terms and conditions with clients. Now, for today's episode, I'm going to let you go back to that episode and really dive deep into those 5 areas. The reason I want to break this down into a simple 3-step framework is because boundaries can be incredibly difficult for many people. And it's not just introverts or people that don't like confrontation per se. Holding boundaries and communicating boundaries can be a trigger for many people because we ultimately don't want conflict. And I want you to hear that boundaries do not need to mean conflict. Boundaries are incredibly healthy. In fact, if this podcast or this episode was actually talking about how to have healthy, functional relationships in our personal lives, boundaries is a huge topic. So whether you are currently thinking, I am nailing the boundaries game, or you need a little help, or you feel that you have no boundaries at all, let's dive in and make this incredibly simple to understand and execute. First and foremost, the issue that I see with boundaries or holding boundaries is that we don't actually take the time to really get clear with ourselves, meaning having that hard conversation with ourselves about what is it that we really want. Now, don't ask me why that conversation can tend to be a little difficult, or maybe we just don't take the time to ask ourselves. But I am here to tell you that you absolutely owe it to yourself to answer the question of, what do I need to show up my best? You see, when I phrase it that way, or I ask my clients to phrase it that way of what do I need to show up my best, it's actually not a selfish endeavor to identify or create or communicate these boundaries. Because when we show up best, when we are our best, we are better moms and spouses and aunts and uncles and business owners and leaders and contributors to our community and the things that we're passionate about. You see, the world actually needs you, only you, like you, there's only one of you, and the world needs you to show up your best. So I love starting off with the question of, what do I need to be my best? Now, this is where it can show up in any area. Maybe you need more quiet downtime. Maybe you want to be able to get out in nature more. Maybe you want exercise time. Maybe you need to say no to a particular client or project. Maybe you need boundaries with your team members so that you can be your best and not short-tempered and overwhelmed. There are so many areas of our lives that we actually just accept as the normal and don't ask ourselves, but in this moment and in this time and in this situation, what do I need to show up my best? And then once you've answered those questions, the work is how do you create that? How do you then go to step 2 and 3 about lovingly communicating it to those that matter and then holding those boundaries? Now, boundaries, and I may be jumping ahead, can actually be boundaries with yourself, boundaries with others, boundaries in your business, or those that you love and are in your personal inner circle, like your family. So, first and foremost, get clear with what it is that you need to show up your best. And there's a piece of empowering ownership of this, right? How many times have you thought, my employee should just know not to interrupt me when my door is shut, or my kids should just understand like I'm working right now, or your spouse, right? That's a victim mentality. And I want you to start with the ownership of, do you really know what you need so that you can clearly articulate it to others? Because when we give mixed messages, rooting from, we don't really know what we need, and that changes from day to day or moment to moment, it's no wonder that the people around us are a bit confused about our boundaries. I believe that healthy boundaries will always change, and you will discover new things that you need to show up your best all the time. So here's your pro tip. Never stop asking yourself. Some ways to know to go back and start this loop again is to ask yourself, do you feel a little out of balance? Has a season changed in your personal life or your business life? Meaning seasons of, is it really busy? Did an employee leave? Did something change in your personal life where you feel that the boundaries you had are not serving you well enough and you either need more or you need to change them? This is one of those self-coaching moments that I believe we could be asking ourselves all the time to level up as we change day to day, week to week, year over year. All right, so step number 1 is taking the time to clearly identify your boundaries by answering the question of, what is it that you need to show up your best? Number 2, once you're clear about what it is that you need, it is your job to lovingly and clearly communicate your boundaries. There is not room for uncertainty or wishy-washy. And I say lovingly because oftentimes we're sharing our boundaries with people that we truly, truly care about. And it's kind of changing the status quo or the norm. Maybe it's the norm that your kids just walk into your office at any time. Maybe it's the norm that you don't take time out in the morning for yourself before the world wakes up and starts. Maybe your boundaries have an effect on someone else's life. Even communicating boundaries to your employees or your team members is shifting up that dynamic a bit. And so I have found that it is our responsibility to clearly and lovingly, compassionately communicate those boundaries. And don't skip this step. And I'm not joking here. There's often times that we have internal boundaries, like we have a way in which we think things should go, and then somehow we think someone should be a mind reader and just understand our boundaries, right? Think of your spouse. Has there been a time where you're like, why doesn't he or she know that? They should just know that. And guess what? I've been with my husband for 20 plus years and he is yet to be a mind reader. It is my responsibility to communicate my own boundaries or what it is that I want, and vice versa for him. And I think that that's going to be true for all of your relationships, is we can't think that someone else is on the same page, because if you remembered, it took a little bit for you to get on your own page by answering the question of, what is it that you need to show up your best? All right, so now that we have lovingly and clearly communicated our boundaries, here's where I see another big misstep with boundaries. We think, we have the belief often that once we communicate them, that that's just what it is. That actually they should never try and break those boundaries, run up against those boundaries, ignore those boundaries, because we did just say them, right? Like we just communicated them, and we communicated them clearly, and we communicated them lovingly, and they shouldn't do that. I would, in fact, assume they are going to run up against those boundaries and break them. because you're asking them to make changes in the way that they interact with you. And changes don't happen overnight because of one conversation. And having the thought that they shouldn't break those boundaries serves no one and can create anxiety, resentment, anger, frustration. And I don't know about you, but those are feelings I don't like to have. So I'm going to work on changing the thought. And the thought is actually more in alignment with reality, which is they're going to run up against those boundaries. They're going to push boundaries. And you know that to be true. For those of you that have children and you remember when they were toddlers, or maybe have nieces or nephews or grandchildren, isn't it kind of assumed that toddlers are going to push your boundaries? Like, we almost normalize that to say, like, they're finding their own, they're getting their own personality, they're going to push up against boundaries. And you navigate it. And you clearly communicate what those boundaries are. No, it's not okay to throw yourself down in the middle of the grocery store because mom or dad won't buy you a piece of candy. You're going to communicate those boundaries, and most likely for many of you, you are going to hold those boundaries. But you probably understand that that's part of them growing up and developing. And so it's not as frustrating as saying they should never push a boundary. They should just do everything that mom and dad says. All right, so we're not dealing with toddlers every day. We are actually dealing with grown adults and little people. And I'm going to tell you, nothing changes. They are going to push your boundaries. So the skill set here and the importance of closing this 3-step loop is that you hold your boundaries. In fact, my hands are up right now as I'm recording this episode of like, hold your ground. Because more damage can actually be done here by if someone's pushing your boundaries or breaking your boundaries, that if you were clear and now you're not, and you make exceptions all the time, or you just ignore that a boundary was pushed or broken or stompled right over, then you're giving mixed messages. And your boundaries that you need for you to show up your best are never going to be as important to someone else. So here's where I want you to, again, stand strong and hold your boundaries. Some of my best tips here are you just reiterate the boundary. So I'm going to run this through an example. My son, I've worked from home since my son was 2 years old. And so he is normalized. Like, mom works from home, closed door means closed door. Mom yelling, she's recording means quiet in the house, right? Is there ever a time that he's going to walk right in? Yes. In fact, right now, this morning, I walked in his room and I said, here's what I need you to do to get ready for school. I need to go record an episode and I'll be out at this time. Clear, right? Clear boundaries. And he knows recording means quiet in the house, door closed, don't come in. He literally came in 5 minutes later. Now, he's 10 years old. And I'm certain he listened at the door because he does that. And he probably didn't hear me recording. And he just opened the door and he's like, hey, mom, what you doing? And I'm like, babe, I told you I'm recording an episode. Well, I didn't hear you talking. Okay, but I was getting my stuff together. Like, you're so lucky I wasn't recording. And he's like, okay, I got it. And I said, I need you to leave and keep the dogs quiet and let mom record. That was it. I didn't make it mean anything. I didn't get myself incredibly frustrated. He's 10 years old and he wanted to talk to his mom. What if I had let him just walk right in, answer his question or talk to him about whatever he wanted to talk about, and never address the fact that he walked in on a closed door while I announced I was recording? That would give him mixed messages. And the next time he walks in on a closed door, no wonder, because last time it was okay. So not that he needed to be punished, but I did need to say, sweetie, mom's recording. I need you to respect that, and I need you to keep the house quiet. I will be out at X time. Okay, Mom, turned around and walked away. I have had versions of this conversation for 8 years. And my guess is you've had versions of your boundary conversations with children or spouses or team members. Now, having that conversation is not the everyday in my house. I would say maybe once a week with my son. That is okay. And I want to tell you that I believe it's my responsibility to hold the boundaries and clearly communicate what they are and not waver on my expectations, because that's giving a mixed message to my son. For you, it's the same thing with your employees. It's the same thing with your clients or your customers. It's the same thing with our spouses or anyone else, our parents, right? Is that we need to hold that line. And it's so that we can show up and be our best and serve the world and be fully present in the moments that we need to be present in. And it is not wrong that they're going to push the boundaries or ask to break the boundaries or stomp right over them. And so it doesn't need to be a frustrating experience. It doesn't need to be confrontational. You get to hold your boundaries because your goal is for you to show up your best, right? All right. So I'm going to break these down and recap really quick. 1, we are taking 100% ownership that first and foremost, we need to get clear about what it is we need to show up our best. 2, we are going to take the responsibility of lovingly and clearly communicating our boundaries to those it affects or influences or changes their lives in some way. 3, is your job, your responsibility to hold the boundaries. And that is your responsibility and it's part of the process. There's nothing wrong with that. That's my 3 steps to making boundaries successful. And I'm specifically talking about business boundaries because this is a business podcast. But as you know, who we are personally and professionally all melt together to be who we are when we show up to do our best in our business. If you feel comfortable starting out in your personal relationships with setting stronger boundaries, start there. If you feel more comfortable doing it with a client, or maybe you're more comfortable doing it with someone that you pay on your team, start somewhere, build that muscle up, build the confidence, learn that it is completely okay to have those boundaries, and then keep stacking them until you feel like you have what you need with regards to how you spend your time, how you're accessible, how people are in your world when you're trying to work. The options are actually endless on where and how we need boundaries in our lives. And lastly, you can always make the choice to have an exception to a boundary. And you can communicate that exception. And so don't think that a boundary, once you've identified it and communicated it and that you hold that boundary, that there's never any wiggle room. You may feel different in that day and you may be completely elated that your son or daughter or puppy dog or spouse walked into your office unexpectedly and you can say, oh my gosh, like I had my door closed. I forgot it was closed. I'm so happy to see your face. Welcome home. Right? I still addressed the boundary that was broken, which they walked right through my office door. But in that moment, my husband had been gone for 14 hours working or 12 hours working, and I missed him, and I am actually ecstatic to see him. And I'm not going to tell him I need him to come back. All right. So that was just one little example to tell you. Don't feel like this needs to be sticky. Own who you are in the moment. Enjoy it. And you get to make the rules. You get to make the exceptions. I would just say, identify the boundary that was broken so everyone's on the same page, and then embrace the moment. I have loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk, and I sure hope you found today's episode incredibly valuable. In fact, if you have, I would love to hear from you. In fact, I just responded to a listener's email and I was thinking, gosh, like, I'm sure it was great perhaps for her, but it was really great for me to put a face and a name to a listener. So if you just want to drop a note and say hi or ask me a burning question that I may answer in an upcoming episode of Productivity Straight Talk, send me an email at hello@theproductivityspecialist.com. Again, that's hello@theproductivityspecialist.com. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So today I'm extending an invitation for you to practice the 3 steps to clearly identifying, communicating, and holding boundaries. I know the results will be rippling throughout your business and your personal life. So I encourage you to figure out where you're at and just decide today, tomorrow, I'm going to get better at boundaries. And then take those wins and stack them on top of the wins for tomorrow and the next day. And as a reminder, if you heard about the Vision Board Happy Hour at the beginning and thought, I am so going to sign up, but you didn't stop and hit pause and go over to theproductivityspecialist.com/vision and sign up, now is your time. Hit pause. Don't go anywhere thinking, I'll do that later, because hey, I know that doesn't often happen. So wherever you're listening to this episode, I want you to tap on your phone, hit the notes section, and there will be a link directly to signing up to join us for the Vision Board Happy Hour. I cannot wait to see you. I cannot wait to have conversations and just a great time talking about what is possible for 2021 together. So again, head on over to theproductivityspecialist.com/vision. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.